Hello again. So this is Swami Pranava, and in this part of the video, we are going over the relationships between the planets. So I mentioned that planets could be friends, they could be neutrals, they could be enemies. And so this chart shows you, first, the sun has three friends, Moon, Mars, and Jupiter. And these four planets actually are, you might say, like a group of friends. So you'll notice that if you look at the moon, he considers the sun his friend and Mercury his friend, but he actually considers Mars and Jupiter as neutrals. So the moon is not as close to Mars and Jupiter as he is to the sun and Mercury in terms of friendship, but the sun considers Moon, Mars, and Jupiter to be friends. And Mercury would be a neutral. And you see the moon considers Mercury a friend. And then enemies of the sun would be Venus and Saturn. And then if we look at Mars, he considers Sun, Moon, and Jupiter to be his friends. So that's consistent with the sun's view that Moon, Mars, and Jupiter are friends. So Mars agrees with this grouping of four. You see that the sun, uh, you might say, prefers. Mars also prefers that same grouping of the four friends. So this indicates that Mars is quite close to the sun in terms of friendship, and Moon is not in exact agreement with the sun because Moon has its own, you might say, way of thinking. Moon is the mind. Sun is like the individual self or the consciousness, the soul. It also represents ego. And so there's positive and negative aspects to all the planets. And the moon is not entirely in agreement with the sun about who is a friend. And Venus and Saturn are considered neutrals, but Mercury is considered an enemy. And then if you look at Mercury, he considers the sun and Venus as friends, and Mars, Jupiter, Saturn neutral, and Moon as enemy. So that's interesting because the moon sees Mercury as a friend, but Mercury sees the moon as an enemy. So that's quite a difference between moon and Mercury, their view of who is a friend and who is not, who is an enemy. And then Jupiter considers Sun, Moon, and Mars to be friends. And again, see, that's a grouping of four: Jupiter, Sun, Moon, and Mars. Jupiter, Sun, Moon, Mars. Same view as the sun. So Mars and Jupiter are in accordance with the sun, but the moon is not entirely in accordance. He considers the sun a friend, but he's not so close to Mars and Jupiter. And then you see Venus considers Mercury and Saturn as friends and considers Mars and Jupiter neutral, but the sun and moon are enemies. Saturn considers Venus and Mercury a friend, Jupiter a neutral, and Sun, Moon, and Mars as enemies. So you can see that Saturn has quite an opposite view of the Sun because he considers the Sun his worst enemy. And so he doesn't like the friends of the Sun either, the Moon or Mars. He considers Jupiter just a neutral. So out of that grouping of four, Jupiter, Sun, Moon, and Mars, who are all usually friends, except from the moon's perspective, Saturn disagrees. He doesn't go along with those friends, but he rather chooses Venus and Mercury. Rahu and Ketu are friends with Mercury, Venus, and Saturn. Mars they consider neutral, and he's enemies of the Sun, Moon, and Jupiter. Well, that's to be expected because Sun, Moon, and Jupiter are the three Sattvic planets. Rahu and Ketu are both Tamasic. So you can imagine Tamasic um, beings usually don't want to associate with sattvic beings like Sun, Moon, and Jupiter. They consider Mars also tamasic, but they consider him neutral. But they're friends with the tamasic Saturn and the rajasic Mercury and Venus. So you might say that Rahu and Ketu are friends with the more materially oriented, more kind of practical planets. And they're not so oriented with Mars, which is a warrior planet, and Sun, Moon, and Jupiter, which are more spiritual planets. Okay, so that's a little bit about the planets. I hope it helps you.